We begin today the Gemara on Daf Mem Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the top of the Yamad. The Gemara here continues from what it said before on the bottom of Daf Lamed Tes, that Yoshav v'loy over aveda noisen lo yischar ka'isa mitzvah, that a person that was confronted by a big nisayim, by a big test, by a big temptation of Yetzer Hara, and he overcomes it, so then he gets schar like he did a mitzvah. And Rashi actually said over there that a mitzvah you say to mizur, there's nothing greater than this when a person can be strong and overcome this temptation. So the Gemara here brings another 2 stories about this. So the pasuk says, Giboire kayach oisei devarai, those that have strong might, they do the Eibish's words, l'shmaya b'kol dvarai, to listen to the voice of Hashem. So what is this strength or this might that the pasuk is talking about? It's like Rab Tzadik, what he did and what his colleagues also did the same. So the story was of Rab Tzadik, Tavate Hahi Matrunisa. There was this noble woman that demanded from him to come with her to do an Aveda. So Allah, he says to her, Chalash Lili Boy, I'm too weak. Can't. V'lei Matzina, I can't. Ikke midi lemechal, do you have something to eat so I can strengthen myself? Amralei, so she says to him, Ikke davar tameh, I have food here, I have something I can serve you, but it's not kosher. Amala, so he tells her, no problem, you can serve it to me. My nafkemina, what difference does it make? The avid ha, achal ha. Someone that's ready to do what you're asking of me to do would be ready to eat this food that's not kosher as well. Shagres tanura kamanchale. So she put on the oven, and she put this food, this roast, into the oven to prepare it for him to eat. Salik v'yasek begavei. Rab Tzadik went and jumped inside the oven as well. Amralei, she saw this, she said to him, my hi, what's this? What happened? Amarla, so he said to this noblewoman, the avid ha, someone that's ready to do this that you want me to do, nafal baha, falls into fire, falls into the Gehenna. So therefore, I jumped into the oven. Amralei, so she said to him, Hiyadi kula hai. If I would have known that this is so severe for you, so then loitzartich, I wouldn't have pained you, I wouldn't have asked you. And then she let him go. So Rashi said he had to do this because he couldn't get out of her otherwise. Rashi brings that she could have killed him if he would have just refused. So therefore, he did this to make the pointer, and then she let him go. Another story, the Gemara says, Rav Kahana, have a kamaz bin dikuli. Rav Kahana would sell dikuli baskets for women that they would use to put their weaving tools inside, their utensils. Tovate ahi matrunise. So in this job that he had, he interacted with different women. So this noble woman also demanded it to come with him with her to do an aveda. Allah, so he excused himself and said to her, Ezel ikashet nafshoy, let me go and beautify myself. So what did he do? He ran away. Salik v'kanofo migra la'ara. He went onto a rooftop and threw himself down from the roof to the ground. Asa Eliyahu Hanavi came and kiblei, and he held him. He received him. He shouldn't fall to the ground. Yeah, there's a discussion actually in Mefarshim about this, whether a person is allowed to do this, because for this thing, if you're allowed to go and kill yourself for this. Okay. Amalei. So Eliyahu Hanavi tells Rav Kahane, Atrachton arba mea parsi. You caused me to come out of my way 400 parsa to come and save your life. Amalei, so Rav Kahane said to Eliyahu Hanavi, Mi godamli. What caused me to come to such a situation that I have to do this, to sell these baskets for women, and they brought me to this problem here? La vaniyusa, isn't it my poverty? So Eliyahu Hanavi heard this. Yavle shifa de dindri. He gave him a vessel full of gold coins, and then so he shouldn't have to deal with women anymore. The Gemara now goes back to the Mishnah that was mentioned before here. Mishnah we say every morning. And the Gemara has a question on this. Rami laid over Rav Nachman. Rav asked Rav Nachman the following question. So the Mishnah says, Nan, ludvarim shadam oisa. These are the things a person does in this world. Oisan va'oichel periseim b'olam hazeh. And the fruits of the reward you get in this world. V'hakera, and the principle of the reward is kayemes le'olam haba. You get in the world to come. Elohein kibud aveim gemilas chasadim. Chlas Asarchim is missing here for some reason. Va'ava shalom shebein adam lachaveiroi. That's the list that it says here in the Mishnah. Now, what's the source of all these different mitzvahs that you get a schar for them, the paytis of them in this world? So because by Kibbud Avim the pasuk says, "Laman Yerichen Yamecha," Ulaman yitav lach. So it means also over here you have good in this world. Yarichi Yemech is in Olam Haba, but yitav lach is in this world. The Gemilas Chasadim Ksev, Reidev Tzedakah v'Chesed Yimtza Chayim. One that chases after, he pursues tzedakah, to give tzedakah and chesed, he'll find life. The chayim here means in Olam Haba, but then it says kavod, that you'll also get kavod, and that kavod means in this world. Ba'ava is shalom ksiv, and a person that brings peace. So the pasuk uses a term bakei shalom, sikat peace v'ratfeyu, and pursue it. So it also uses the term ratfeyu, similar to the previous pasuk reidif. Rabavo, Asya, Ridife, I compare these two expressions of Ridife here. Ksiv vacha bakei shalom v'ratfeyu, or ksiv hasam in the pasuk by tzedakah it says reidiv tzedakah v'chesed. So therefore the schar is the same, that there is paytus of it, the kavod is paytus for this in this world. The Talmud Torah ksiv, regarding learning Torah, how do I know that you get schar in this world? Because the pasuk says, Ki hu chayecha v'oirech yamecha. So when it says chayecha, it means olam hazeh, and oirech yamecha, long life, that refers to the yom shekuli arach, that's in olam haba. So that's the source for all of these mitzvahs that are mentioned here in this Mishnah. But now, this was the question that Rava asked Rav Nachman. B'shiluach hakein nami ksiv laman yitav locha v'harachta yomim. In this pasuk it also says that you'll have good life, which is in this world, and harachta yomim in olam haba. So why does the Mishnah not mention shiluach hakein is one of these mitzvahs? So he answered him. So listening nami ha. His question was, we'll let it say shiluach hakein. So Rav Nachman answered, Tana v'shir. The Mishnah taught the list of different mitzvahs that a person has, the schar in this world, but it left out one. It left out over here the mitzvah of shluch haken. So the Gemara asks him this, Tani Tana, Elu Devarim. The Tana says over here the term. The Tana says the term of Elu Devarim, Va'at Omrit, Tana V'shir, and you're saying that the Tana leaves out one? How could you say he leaves out? Sorry, if the Mishnah clearly says, Elu Devarim, these are the things, these are the mitzvahs. So there has to be a reason why it left out Shiluch HaKan. Amar Rava, so Rava said that Rav Idi Asberali. Rav Idi had an answer for me, and he explained to me as follows. There's another pasuk where it says, Imru Tzadik Ki Toiv, say to a Tzadik which is good, Ki Pri Ma'malaleim Yechelu, because the fruits of their work they eat. So the pasuk begins saying that there's a Tzadik which is good. So the question is, what does this pasuk mean? Yesh tzadik toiv, yesh tzadik she'enit toiv. Is there a tzadik that is good and there's a tzadik that's not good? What does it mean a tzadik which is good? Elo toiv l'shamayim or l'briyos, a tzadik which is good for heaven and good over here in this world. In other words, he does the mitzvahs ben adam lamokem and also ben adam lachaveiroi. He's a person that's good in both senses. Zeh tzadik toiv. That's called a tzadik which is good. But toiv l'shamayim, a tzadik that's good l'shamayim in his mitzvahs. But viral briyos, but in his midas over here and is in this world, what he does, he's ra for briyos, or he's sharing and beneficial for other people. Zat tzaddik she'enit toiv. That's a tzaddik that's not toiv. So over here, what this pasuk is saying is this tzaddik, which is Isaac in mitzvahs, not only mitzvahs ben adam lamakim, but he does mitzvahs also which are ben adam lachaveiroi. On him, the pasuk is saying kipri malaleim yechelu, that they eat the fruits of their work here in this world. That's what the Mishnah was saying, that oichel periseim b'olam hazeh. So the point that Rav Idi explained is that all these mitzvahs that this Mishnah is mentioning are mitzvahs that are also here, toiv in this world. Right? Kibbutz Gemilas Chasadim, Havah Shalom, and even Talmud Torah as well, which gives a person the knowledge that he has to know how to fulfill all the mitzvahs. So all these things are toiv, not only l'shamayim but also l'briyos. That's what's mentioned. Shuluach hakan though is not toiv l'shamayim and l'briyos, so therefore it's not mentioned here in this Mishnah. Okay, but the Gemara's answer is still not 100% clear. The Maharsha talks about this because in the end of the day it does say by Shuluach hakan in the pasuk clearly that he gets a schar in this world, toiv no'ilam hazeh. So even if it's not toiv l'briyos, the pasuk still says he gets that schar. The Maharsha says that when it comes to Shuluach hakan, the reason it doesn't mention it here because he gets not only schar from the paytus of what he does in this world, but even from the keren, from the principle of his schar, he also begins to get that schar in this world, which shows on a certain chesaron that the keren is not reserved for Olam Haba. So therefore, it's not mentioned here in this Mishnah. The Gemara continues with that pasuk, the same pasuk where it speaks about the tzaddik. It says afterwards, Similar in the reverse, it said regarding a Rasha, oy l'Rasha ra, that woe to a bad Rasha, ki gmul yodav yasaloi, that what he does with his hands will be done to him. So what does it mean here when it refers to a Rasha as a person which is ra? V'chiyesh Rasha ra, is there a Rasha that's bad? V'yesh eina ra, and there's a Rasha that's not bad. So the difference is el ra l'shamayim v'ra l'briyos, a person that's a Rasha and his rishus is both bad for the Eibishter and also bad for people in this world. So Rashi says like a person that's a ritzeyach, a gazlan, a ganav, person that here between people is bad. Hu Rasha ra. That's what this pasuk means when it says a Rasha which is ra. But then when you have ra l'shamayim, but ve'en ra l'briya is a person that does averis ben adam la'makim, and Rashi gives a few examples, but he's not necessarily ra between people. Zeh Rasha she'en ra. That's the Rasha that's not ra. Okay, so this is Inyan. It's famous. The Rebbe very often spoke about this Inyan of toiv l'shamayim and toiv l'briyos, that the Aveda V'yid has to be combining the two together. The Rebbe used to always speak about when it came on a Tuesday, when it says twice ki toiv, this lashon of here that it says regarding a tzaddik, which is toiv l'shamayim and toiv l'briyos, that the ultimate Aveda V'yid is to have both, but not only to have both, but to combine them together as one. That is connected to the Eibishter to the full extent, but he brings down Getlichkeit into the world, into the lowest place, l'briyos. Okay, here the Gemara points out a difference that there is when it talks about the result of what a tzaddik does, right? It says by a tzaddik, kitoiv prima leleim yechelu, that he eats the fruits of his work, and by the Rasha it uses a different term. It says by the Rasha ra, gmul yodav ye'asalai. So the Gemara explains. Hazuchos, when a person has merits, the tzaddik, yesh lo keren, so there's the principle, the reward that he gets, and v'yesh lo peiris. There's also peiris as well. Shanem, as the pasuk we just quoted, ki imru tzaddik kitoi v'goyim, the pasuk concludes pri malalein yechelu, that has fruits as well. But when it comes to the Rasha, aveda, when a person does an aveda, yesh lo keren, so then that work that he does, the things that he does, the avedas with his hands, so there's the principle, the punishment that he gets, but that, but ve'in lo peiris. But there's no other peiris in addition that he gets punished for. Shenema oy l'Rasha ra, and it just says gemul yodav yasalei, what he did with his hands, the Eibishter will do to him, but it doesn't mention anything about peiris. Okay, but now the Gemara asks, but there's a different place where there is a pasuk that talks about the peiris of the actions of even a Rasha. So ve'elamani mekayim, what's the meaning of what it says regarding a Rasha? Ve'yochal mipri darkam, and they will get to eat from the fruits of their ways. You mean the negative sense, and they'll be full from their advice or from their counsel, referring to a Rasha, that there is peiris of their actions that they do that they will suffer from. So now Gemara explains, even by a Rasha, avedis, she'oisa peiris, those kinds of avedis that bring about fruits, meaning it has a further result, an influence on other people. Rashi says like Chil Hashem, a person does an Aveda and other people learn from him. So it's not only he that did the Aveda, but it has a result and an influence on other people. Then Yesh La Peiris. So then the punishment that he has also there's Peiris to it. But V'she'ena is a Peiris. But if he does not do an Aveda in this way, where it has an influence on others, then Ein La Peiris. Then the punishment that comes to him has no Peiris as well. Okay, so this is dafka regarding a Rasha. But by a tzaddik, even if he does a mitzvah that does not have like a Kiddush Hashem and an influence on others, the Eibishter gives him prima leleim. They do get the fruits, an additional schar for what they did. Because when it comes to schar, it's much more than in the negative, in the punishment. Another thing the Gemara says we can learn regarding the difference of a mitzvah and an aveda, how a mitzvah is much stronger, the schar for it by a yid. Machshavet teiva. If you have a good thought to do a mitzvah, mitzar for the Maisa, the Eibishter will consider it like he did it in action. That's a simple taich of the Gemara. And the Gemara brings the pasuk, Shenema oz nidbru yira Hashem mishareyeyu. The ones that fear Hashem were speaking to one another. Vayakshiv Hashem vayishma, the Eibishter listens. Vayikasav seif zikaron lefanav liyira Hashem u'lechoshvei shemai. And those that are thinking of His name. Mai u'lechoshvei shemai. It concludes that they think of Hashem's name. Amar Avasi afile chashav adam lasis mitzvah. A person is planning and thinking to do a mitzvah. V'nenas, and then if something happened out of his control, v'lo yasa, he didn't fulfill the mitzvah. Mai lalav akasav kilo asa. The Eibishter considers as if he fulfilled this mitzvah. Now there's another pshat. The Alter Rebbe brings this in Tanya and in other places many times in Chassidus. This is brought machshava teva mitzar full of mice and Tanya perek tezayin. The Alter Rebbe says what it means is a person does an action of a mitzvah, and the ava v'yira in his heart is not there to give the chayis in the mitzvah, but there's a machshava. He has the isbaynus, he has the understanding in his head that he's doing it for the Eibishter's sake. So the Eibishter is mitzaref, the machshava, to the maisa. Even though there's a big gap between his machshava and his maisa, there's no feeling there, but the Eibishter combines and brings them both together. That's how the Alter Rebbe teaches this term, mitzarfa. There's a tziruf, to bring these two together. Now, when it comes to an Aveda, though, machshava ra, ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzarfa l'maisa. If a person has a machshava ra and he doesn't put it into action, so then the Eibishter does not combine it to consider it as if he did it. Shenema oven imre isi belibi. The Eibishter sees an iniquity in a yid's heart. Lo yishma Hashem. The Eibishter doesn't listen. The Eibishter doesn't pay attention to that. Right? And the reason is because when a yid does not put a machshava ra into action, what is that a result of? Because he did tshuva. That's why. Because he regretted. He had a plan and he didn't do it. That's a sign that he did tshuva. So the Eibishter does not count it. Velo. Now the Gemara asks on this, but there's another pasuk where we see that the Eibishter does count a bad thought. Velamani mekayim hineni mevi ela'amazeh ra pri machshavaisam. That the Eibishter says, I'm going to bring on the people a bad because a result of their bad thoughts. Machshava. So over here you see that the Eibishter does consider their thoughts. So the Gemara answers, there's two answers here. One answer is machshava she'oise pri HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzarfa l'maisa. If it's a kind of machshava that you actually did something about it, there was an action. So then the Eibishter is mitzaref the machshava to the maisa, meaning that then the punishment will be for both, for the machshava and for the maisa. But that's only after it was put into action. Machshava she'ein ba pri. But if it was just a thought a person had, and I had no result, he didn't do anything about it, ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzarfa l'maisa. The Eibishter does not combine that machshava to maisa because the person had charata, he didn't do anything about it. Okay, but now the Gemara asks yet, there's going to be another answer to this question, but first the Gemara asks from another pasuk, ve'ela hadichsiv l'man tfeises beis Yisrael belibam. The Eibishter is teifes a yid, he grabs a yid because of what is in his heart. What does this mean? Why? What's in his heart? That pasuk is speaking about a yid that has a machshava for avodas zarah. Da'amar chamura avodas kachavim. Avodas kachavim is very stringent. Shekala kaifer ba, one that denies avodas zarah k'meida b'chal ha'Torah kula. He's agreeing, he's accepting all of Torah. And the same in the reverse. Some are actually guided over here in the Gemara that one that is meidan avodas zarah, he's kaifer in all of Torah. So therefore over here the Eibishter does punish for the machshava as well. Now the Gemara brings a second shot when it is that the Eibishter does punish just for a machshava alone, even if it did not come to an action. Ula says kid Rav Huna. This could be understood based on what Rav Huna said, and we had this here earlier in the Masechta. Rav Huna said, Kivin she'avar adam aveda. Person does an aveda once, and then v'shana ba, he did it a second time. Hutraloi, it became permitted to him. What does this mean? You repeat an Aveda. So now it's permitted for you to do this Aveda. Elo nasis loi keheter. This Aveda becomes to the person like it's permissible in his eyes. He just tramples over it, it doesn't matter to him. So now she explains what Ula is saying over here is, when do you say that if a person has a negative machshava and he didn't do anything about it, the Eibishter does not punish for the maisa? That's when the person had the machshava one time and he didn't do the aveda. So then if he didn't put it into action, we know that the reason is because he regretted. He did tshuva. That's why he didn't put it into action. But if a person did this aveda once, twice, and again, and we know that for him this is heter, he doesn't matter to him. So then the fact that he didn't put it into maisa is because something happened. So something stopped him of putting it into maisa. But he didn't have charata, and he didn't want to. On his own, he would have put it into maisa, and therefore he gets punished for that as well. Amar Rabavo Mishum Rab Chanina. Rabavo says the name of Rab Chanina. Noyach leila adam. It's better for a person sheyaver aveda b'seiser, that he does an aveda in secret and hiding, vayachal shem shemayim b'fehesya, and he shouldn't do the aveda openly in public that people should see. Shenema va'atem beis Yisrael koyam Hashem ish gilulov. Every person his aveda zara l'chu ivdu va'acher in einchem shemim elai v'as shem kachi leisachalo. Even if you go and you sin for yourself and you don't listen to me, but my holy name you should not desecrate. So what the Gemara is saying over here is, if a person is in a situation where he can't control himself, so then he does an aveda, but he shouldn't do it in a way that it should create a chil Hashem, that other people should learn from him. And the Gemara here brings another statement about this. Amar Abiloya Zakin, Imraya Adam. If a person sees she yitzray misgaber olav, that his Yetzer Hara is very strong, and he can't overcome it, let him go to a place where nobody knows him. V'yilbush chayrim, let him dress himself with dark black garments. V'yiskaser chayrim, he covers himself with these black garments. And then v'yasa kamisha li b'chafetz, and he could do what his heart desires. Anybody should not desecrate the Eibish's name publicly. So what this means is he's in a place no one's going to learn from him, and he wears these garments where people look down at him. Who's this person wearing these these garments? So then he does the Aveda. That's a simple pshat of the Gemara, and that's what Rashi here says. Taisvus over here, however, adds, Rabbeinu Chananel said, Chas v'shalom, the Gemara is saying that a person can go and do mashali b'chafetz. What it's saying is, a person sees that the Yetzer Hara grabs hold of him to do an Aveda, so you should sort of push off the Yetzer Hara. If you're going to tell the Yetzer Hara, I'm not going to do this Aveda, the Yetzer Hara is you're going to confront him, he's going to fight back even stronger. So instead, delay him. Tell the Yetzer Hara, yeah, I'm going to do the Aveda, well, but I'm going to travel there, I'm going to do the Aveda there, I'm going to get these garments, and by the time you travel there, and by the time you do all the preparations for the Aveda, by then, the Yetzer Hara calms down, and this is an Eitzah, to prevent yourself, to stop yourself from doing the Aveda. That's what Rabbeinu Chananel said. But the Gemara asks him this, what Tanya, we learned in the Braise, this is a Mishnah, Kol Shaloi Chos, Al Kavod Kainoi, a person that doesn't care about the honor of the Eibishter, right? Because he does an Aveda in hiding, and he thinks that the Eibishter doesn't see him. So it's fitting for such an individual that he shouldn't have come into the world. And Mahi, what is this referring to? Rabbi says, one thing is Mistakel Bekeshes, someone that looks at a rainbow, the Shechina is in the rainbow, and a person shouldn't look at the rainbow. Rav Yosef says, this is a person that does an Aveda in hiding, and he thinks that the Eibishter doesn't see him, so he doesn't recognize the honor of the Eibishter. So we see that to do an Aveda b'seiser, Adrab, shows that the person doesn't believe that the Eibishter is present. And says the Gemara, like Kashi, it's not a question. If a person has the ability to subdue his Yetzer Hara, and he says to himself, well, I'm in private, no one sees, so I can do that Aveda. I don't have to do it. I don't have to overcome it. So then he's not makkah, the Eibishter is here. That's what it says, that it's Roi Shalei Bal Olam. But before I was speaking about a person that the Yetzer Hara is so strong and he can't overcome it. So then it says that it's better the Aveda should be done in hiding and not be done publicly in a way that everyone learns from him. Mistakel B'Keshes, the Shechina is in the Keshes. That's what it says. Tanan Hasam, we learned in another Mishnah. So this is not actually a Mishnah. Taisus here says that there's no such a Mishnah. It's a Braise, or maybe it's similar to a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Ein makifin b'chilul Hashem. You don't give credit for one that desecrates Hashem's name. The Gemara is going to explain in a second what that means. Now, echad sheigig v'echad mezid. It doesn't matter if this chilul Hashem happened by mistake or is b'mezid intentionally. Now, my ein makifin. What does it mean that there's no ein makifin? Ama mazutre she'ein oisim kechen v'ni. That you don't treat this person the way a storekeeper usually does. That you give him on credit, but a person that's someone that's machal shem shemayim, so you don't give him what he needs on credit. Mar bereder avana amar loymar. This is referring to how the Eibishter treats this person. Shemaisa shkula machras. That if this person has half mitzvahs, half avedis, but if amongst his avedis there are things that he did that are chil Hashem, that other people learned from him to do avedis, so then even though it's equal, the Eibishter is machriya, the Eibishter tips the scale for the negative. So now she says, "Ein makifim" means the Eibishter does not look deeply. Makifim means when you look deeply into something. That's what the Rashi he brings sources for this, the pshat of this term. The Eibishter doesn't look deeply to see is it more mitzvahs, more avedis. If it looks to be equal, then the Eibishter will tip the scale to the negative because of the chilul Hashem that the person was involved in. Tana Rabbana, we learned in the Braise. Here comes a very famous Gemara. It's brought in the Rambam. The Rebbe always quoted this Gemara. Lo'olam yira adam atzmai. A person should always view himself. Ki'ilu chetzye chay v'chetzye zakai. That he's half in the negative with avedis and half with mitzvahs. And therefore, asa mitzvah achas. If he does just one mitzvah, ashrav, fortunate he is, shachriya atzmai lekavschos, that he tipped the scale for the positive. Avar avera achas, but if he did one more avera, oiloi shechriyas atzma lekav chayva. So then he tips the scale for the negative. Shenem, as the pasuk says, v'chayte echad, and the Gemara is tarshaning as if it says chet echad, just one sin, yoivet teiva harba. He can lose all the good that he has. V'shvul chet yichidi shechayte oivet mena teiva sarba. Just one avera, he can lose all the positive he has because he tips the scale for the negative. So this is regarding how a person should view himself. And the Gemara adds even more so. Not only a person himself, but the entire world is judged by the majority of mitzvahs versus the opposite. And the same, every individual is judged by the majority of what he has. So asa mitzvah achas, a person does just one more mitzvah, ashrav, he's fortunate, shechriya es atzmai, he can tip the scale for himself, ves kol oilam lekavschos, and the entire world for the positive. And the same opposite, over aveira achas, one more aveira, oiloi shechriya es atzmai, he can tip the scale for himself, ves kol oilam, and the entire world, lekav chayva, for the negative. Shenema v'chayta echad chulu b'shvulchet yechidi she'asa zeh, just one aveira, ovid b'menem kol oilam tova. You could lose good for him and for the entire world. Tova Harba, that is, and a lot of good for the entire world. So the Rebbe always used to bring this Gemara. The Rebbe spoke about this Gemara. When people look at themselves, then they don't have the right value of what one mitzvah could do. To be mezaka one year, to put on tefillin one more time. Or a person thinks, well, one word I'm going to say, one thing, and what power does one individual amongst billions of people in the world have? So here the Gemara is telling you that every individual has the tremendous kayach, and if you have an opportunity to be mezaka yid with a mitzvah, so then this can be turn over the entire world. The Rebbe also once said that this inyan, that a person can change the entire world, it's not just a calculation mitzad the cheshbon of mitzvahs and averis, that one more mitzvah can tip the scale, but it's also because the world, the person is the pnimius of the entire existence of the world. The whole world is created for the yid, and the person is the olam katan. So what's going on in his world, when he does something, so he is the pnimius of the world. So that's why one person can change the entire world. It's not just a combination and a cheshbon, but it's the truth that every person has taka the pnimius of the whole world in him. The whole world is created for Yidden, and every individual b'shvili nivra elam, so therefore he can change the entire world with one mitzvah. Rab Shimon ben Yochi said, "Afilu tzaddik gomer, person that's an absolute tzaddik kol yom of his entire lifetime, umarad b'achreina, but he rebels against Hashem at the end of his life. Ibidus arishaynus, he loses all the mitzvahs he did earlier in his life. Yishanem, as the pasuk says, tzidkas tzaddik loy tatzilana b'yoyim pishay." The tzedakis or the mitzvahs of a tzaddik will not save him if he comes and rebels and sins at the end of his life. Same in the opposite. A person that's an absolute rasha all his life. And he does tshuva at the end of his life. The Eibishter will not mention anything about the Avedis that he did before. Shuv rasha. Sorry, it goes together. The Eibishter will not mention anymore any of his rishas that he had before. Shanem, as the pasuk says, that the rasha will not stumble on the rishas that he had before. If he returned, if he did shuva from that rishas. Now the Gemara asks on what it said in the beginning regarding the tzaddik, that he did mitzvahs all his life, and then he did an aveda at the end, and therefore he loses everything. But why? Why shouldn't it be at least like half mitzvahs and half avedas? If all his life he did mitzvahs. Amar Reish Lakish says, when we said before that he loses everything, it's not always. That's only b'toya ala rishaynis. If he's regretting of all the mitzvahs that he did before, then he loses everything from the beginning. But if he just rebels and does Avedis later, and he does not regret what he did before, then he does not lose it. Mishnah, another Mishnah here, just finishing off this Pedic, since we were discussing mitzvahs, so it finishes off with a related subject. Kol sheyeshnei b'mikra b'mishna b'derech eretz. Anybody that he learns Torah, he learns Mikra and Mishnah and Derech Eretz. The pshat of Derech Eretz, the Rishonim here say, means that he has good midas. Then loy b'meheira hu chayta, he will not quickly sin. Shenema v'achota meshulish, when you have this rope, which is made up of these three strands, Mikra, Mishnah, and Derech Eretz, so then it keeps him connected. Loy b'meheira yinatek. V'chol she'enoi loy b'mikra, and loy b'mishnah v'loy b'derech eretz, a person that does not have not mikra and not mishnah and not derech eretz, which again is good midas, einim in a yishuv. So then he's not part of the settled world. He doesn't have any benefit, not for himself and not for anyone else. And such a person is open to sin. Omar Rabbi Elazar bar Rab Tzadik, lema tzadikim nimshalim b'olam. What are tzadikim compared to in this world? Le'ilon, to a tree shekula emid b'makim tara, that stands in a pure place. But there are some branches, a little bit of it, that may be sticking out into an impure place. So niktzatz neifai, so you clip off a little bit of the of those branches in the impure place. So then kula b'makim tara. So then the tree is all pure and doesn't have any connection to evil anymore. Kach, so the same thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu maybe Yisurim al tzadikim b'olam hazeh. The Eibishter brings suffering on tzaddikim in this world. So if there's any evil, anything negative that's in them, the Eibishter is causing the suffering to cleanse them from that. So then they should be totally in a pure place. So they should inherit the world to come. Shenema, and this we learn from the pasuk, V'hoya reishischa mitzar. Your beginnings, which refers here to this world, will be difficult. But v'achrischa, but then in the end, in Olam Haba yizgeh, you'll be very great. The same in the reverse. V'lema rishaim daimim b'olam hazeh. What are rishaim compared to in this world? Lo'olam shekula oim b'mamakim tumeh, to a tree that's all in an impure place. But v'noifei noite l'makim tara. There's some branches that are sticking out into a pure place. Now niktzatz noifei. If you cut off those few branches in the pure place, kula oim b'mamakim tumeh. So then the Rasha finds himself all in an impure place. Kach HaKadosh Baruch Hu mashpil len toiv l'rishaim b'olam hazeh. The Eibusha gives good to rishaim in this world. And then, when they leave this world, they get the full punishment. The Eibusha pushes them down to a low place. Shenema, as the pasuk says, Yesh derech yashar lifnei yish. You look at this Rasha, and it seems like he has a straight path in this world, and everything is fine. But v'achrisa darkei maves. But in the end, his way is a way of death. Now the Gemara brings a discussion regarding mitzvahs. This is a very famous shaila the Gemara discusses. A kvar hoyer abtarfen is a kanim misubim ba'aliyas beis nitza belud. Rab Tarfon and others of Canaan, they were sitting together in this aliyah in the second floor in the house of Nitza in Lud. They were discussing this subject in their mouth. Talmud Gadol or Maisa Gadol? Is learning Torah greater or is doing mitzvahs greater? Then Rab Tarfon so Rab Tarfon answered and said, Maisa Gadol, the action of the mitzvah is greater. Then Rab Kiva answered and said, Talmud Gadol, that learning Torah is greater. Then the conclusion was, they all said, Talmud Gadol, that learning Torah is greater, Shahat Talmud, Mevidlade Maisa. Because when a person learns, you'll have both. The Talmud will bring you to Maisa. So Rashi says, Nimtzu Shneim b'yada, you'll have both in your hands. So this discussion is brought in Chassidus in many, many places. The Maila of Talmud, the Maila of Maisa. The Maila of Talmud is that it reveals more. It gives you the content, information, and the teichen of godliness, of the chachma of the Eibush. It reveals more of giluyim. You have more connection in that way. On the other hand, the Maisa seems to be just a dry action. What's the Maila to the Maisa? So in that sense, Talmud is much greater. But on the other hand, there's a huge Maila to Maisa. Maisa is where the Ratzon of the Eibush is, and that's actually the essence of the bittul of the Yid. The Kabbalah Soil is expressed in the Maisa much more. And it actually says in Chassidus, it's brought from, what the first source of this is, Alter Rebbe said that La'asad Lavai Maisa will be Gadol. Then we'll see the Maila of Maisa. And even today, when the Gemara says that Talmud is Gadol, it's only Gadol because the Talmud is Mevi Lidei Maisa, because you have both. But just the Talmud alone, today we could see the Maila of Maisa through Talmud. That's B'kitzur, one of the inyanim that says in this Gemara. There's another famous prat also that it says in Chassidus, Gadol Talmud, Shemevi Lidei Maisa, that the godless of Talmud, where do you see the godless of a person's learning when his learning leads to action? You have the learning for itself, when it does not connect to action. When the learning leads to action, you have both together, the Talmud and the Maisa. That's the godless of Talmud, because it's not limited to one section or one aspect of the person. When it permeates the person entirely, even in his Maisa, that brings out the true godless of his Talmud. Tanya, we learned Rabbi Yisrael Gadol Talmud. We can see that learning Torah is much greater because there are many great mitzvahs that the Eibishter delayed the fulfillment of these mitzvahs years after the Yidden had the Torah to learn. So learning Torah shekadam lachala. So the Yidden were learning Torah before they were able to fulfill the mitzvah of Chala, 40 shana, 40 years, because Yidden got the Torah. As soon as they came out of Mitzrayim, they got the Torah. And then only 40 years later, when they come into Eretz Yisrael, do they fulfill the mitzvah of Chala. So the Gemara here starts with the mitzvah of Chala, because Chala is a mitzvah that Yidden fulfill as soon as they enter into Eretz Yisrael. Biv v'yachem. Now, l'trumis or l'maisris, the other mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael, like trumis and maisris, they don't fulfill as soon as they come into Eretz Yisrael. They have to wait 14 years until they finish conquering and settling the land. So chamishim v'arba. So they learned Torah, and they didn't get to fulfill this mitzvah for 54 years. And l'shmitim, and then for shmita, after those 54 years, you have to count another 7 years, and that's when they had the first shmita, so that's shishim v'acha, 61 years after they began learning Torah. And l'yoivlois, now for yoivol, you have to add to that 50 years, meya v'shalosh, it comes out to be 103 years. You have the 54 years from when they got Torah, and then the 14 years after they came into Eretz Yisrael, and then another 50 years, so that's 103 years. But the Gemara asks them this, why 103 years? May b'shalosh, may ba'arba havyan. It should be 104 years. 54 years and then another 50 years until you come to Yovel. And says the Gemara, Kasavar Yovel mitchilasai hu mishamet. We're talking over here about the slaves and the properties that go back to the original owner or go free. And this Tana holds that happens in the beginning of the year, Yom Kippur, when they blew the shofar in the beginning. So it's not at the end of the 50th year, it's at the beginning of the 50th year. So then therefore it's 103 years after. Okay, so here we see that the Yidden sat and learned Torah for all this time in the Midbar, and they only got to fulfill the mitzvahs later, because that shows in the mile of learning Torah. Just like learning comes before the action, when the Eibusher judges the neshama, when it comes up and he gets punished, or the Eibusher judges and gives for what he did in this world, so it's the din of Torah comes before the din of Maaseh. The first thing that the person will be judged for, and that's regarding the punishment for what he missed out in this world, so the first thing is regarding his learning of Torah. Shanam, as the pasuk says, Paiter Mayim, Reishis Modai. So Rashi teaches Paiter Mayim, a person that lets go of the Mayim. He throws off the yoke of learning Torah, and Torah is compared to water, Reishis Modai. That's the first thing he's judged for. Just like in the negative, in the punishment, it comes first. So to the reward for Torah comes first. That they get the lands and they inherit. And Ba'avor Yishmeru Chukov, and Rashi says here Yishmeru Chukov, the Tishmeron of Yishmeru refers to learning Torah, v'Toraisav Insaira. And only afterwards it says they keep Torah, which refers to the mitzvahs. Okay, the last point there, we finished the Perek today. So the Mishnah said, Kol she'ein eloi b'mikra v'eloi b'mishnah, person that doesn't learn and doesn't have Mishnah and doesn't have Midas Tevis, so then it's Einim in a Yishuv. He's not from the settled world. Amar Rabbi Yechanan says about such a person who postulates, a person like this is postulated, he doesn't learn, he doesn't have Midas Tevis, he is not embarrassed of anything, he eats in the street, he's mezalzel on himself, we can't even trust his testimony. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Braisa, ha'oichel b'shuk, person that eats out in the street, he's compared to a dog that eats in the street. And the Yesh Oimrim, Pasaledis. And others say that such an individual that's mizalzel in himself and he doesn't have no self-dignity at all, he's Pasaledis, he can't even trust his testimony. That's Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. But Taisus here has a few different pshatim. Taisus says, you see from another Gemara that eating in the street is only something that a Talmud Chacham shouldn't do, but you can't necessarily say that every person that eats in the street is Pasaledis. But that is Rashi's pshat though, so you can be machmal like Rashi. But Taisus over here brings other pshatim and says that it means a person that takes food from people and doesn't pay, even if it's less than a shava pruta, but he doesn't pay for it. Or another pshat Taisus brings that it only refers to a person that eats pas, he eats a whole meal in the street. Okay, sagt the Gemara weiter. We paskin like this Yeshemrim regarding the person that eats in the street that's pasaleidas. Darash bar kapara, ragzan, a person that doesn't have good midas. That's what's the connection of it. We're talking about that midas tevis. So a person that gets angry. So le'alsa biyade ala ragzanusa. What does he have? He has nothing. He doesn't gain anything. All he has is his anger. Adam toiv, but a person that's good, and this means a person with good midas, matimim oisai, he's given to taste mipri myself from the fruits of his good actions in this world. A person that has good midas has a good life. It's like the Mishnah said, a person that doesn't have anything, doesn't learn, doesn't have good midas, so you should make a vow not to have any benefit from him. Stay away from such an individual. Shanama, the pasuk says, of a Moshev Leitzim lo Yashav, a Moshev Leitzim. A person like this is just a Moshev Leitzim. He sits around doing nothing, making jokes, because he has nothing to do. He doesn't learn, he doesn't have midas tevis, so from such a person you should stay away from. Hadran Allah Ha'isha Niknes. This is the conclusion of the first Perek of Masechta Kidushin.